Hello everyone, today is the 23rd video of my database management systems practical video series. This is also going to be the 23rd question in the question list. Let's go to our question list. Here you can see under day 9, here's the question 23, and as I did in my previous videos, I have to remind you we are continuing the question started from question 17. So if you didn't watch those previous videos, you have to watch those videos before watching this one. Otherwise you will not understand what we are doing here. And let's go to a question. Here's the first part. What is the lowest mark obtained for Sinhala subject in the first term? Okay, here we have to answer using the previous database and the data we entered to our database management system. We have to answer to that question using this database exam_mark_db, and here you can see here the tables and the data. In here I'm going to, let me clear this query, write a query. To get this answer we have to write a query, and here you can see we have to write a select query. In this case I'm going to use subqueries in order to create this query, but before that you can see we have to find the lowest mark. So let's see what is the table which storing the marks of these students. Here's the table, the student exam mark record. First we have to write a select query to that table to get the details in the table. So here I am writing the select query to student exam mark record select. For now I need all the details, so asterisks from. Here I am mentioning the database exam_mark_db, and here's the table inside that database student exam mark record, and let's execute this one. Here I end this query by using the semicolon mark, and let's execute this one. Here's the executing button, and here you can see all the details in our student exam mark record are shown in the result. Okay, then you can see in the question, let me show you the question, there's a condition to find our answer. We don't need all the marks of the student, we need only the lowest mark obtained for Sinhala subject in the first term. Okay, there are three conditions. It should be the lowest mark, and then in the Sinhala subject, and in the first term test. So here I'm going to write the condition. I'm going to write a condition to this query. Let's modify this query and get our answer. First I'm going to modify this query to sort or filter only the first term test mark. So here I'm using where clause. Here's the where clause. This is the keyword we use to use when we are defining a condition. So where here I am mentioning the attribute we are going to use to filter these data in the current table. This is the main table, the student exam mark table. This attribute is inside the student mark record table. So here's the attribute name, exam term ID. Let me copy that one, exam term ID. Okay, and it's equal to, and here's the subquery. I am writing a subquery to get the ID of the first term test. The details of the term test are stored in exam term table. Here's the table, and we have to get the ID out of it and then feed that into the main query. Okay, here's the select query, select. I don't need all the details, I need only the ID. So let me copy the attribute name, term ID, and here's the here I'm mentioning the table name, first we have to mention the database name exam mark db, and then our data is in exam term table, and here's the condition to find the id of the first term test. I'm sorting the data or filtering the data from the term name, where term name, let me copy that attribute name to, okay, term name should be equal to first term. Okay, is the query. Let's execute this one. You can see only the first term test. Here in the answer you can see the exam term id is 1 in all the records. That means those are the marks in first term test, and this is the first condition. And here's the second one. I'm using the and keyword. Now here's our second condition. For that we have to mention a attribute name we are using to filter this data in the current table, which is the exam mark record table. I'm using the subject id attribute in exam mark table. Let me copy the attribute name subject id, and it should be equal to, here's the second query. I'm writing this query to get the subject ID of, let me go to the question. We are searching for the ID of Sinhala subject. So you know the details of the subject are stored in subject table. So I'm writing this query to the subject table to get the ID. So we don't need all the details, only the ID. Here let me copy the attribute name ID from exam term db dot, and here's the table subject, where and here I'm searching the data or filtering the data of the subject table using the subject name should be equal to Sinhala language and literature. That's the subject name. So here's the Sinhala language and literature. Now let's execute this one. You can see only the first term test mark belong to the Sinhala language and literature subject is shown in the result. Now we just have to find the lowest mark. For that, you know, we did this kind of filtering in previous videos. We can use the keyword. There's a built-in keyword called min to find the minimum or lowest mark, and here's the lowest mark. I'm finding the lowest mark recorded in the mark attribute. So before that we have to mention, it's better you mention the table name. So student exam mark record, and then the mark attribute inside that table. Let's execute this one. You can see the minimum mark recorded in the first term test of Sinhala subject is 75, and here you can see in the result the attribute name is not very suitable, so we can change that one using the keyword as, and here I am changing the name to minimum mark. Okay, let's execute this one. Here you can see the attribute changed to minimum mark. I think that's it for this question. Let me go to the question. Yeah, we find the lowest mark obtained for Sinhala subject in the first term test, and here we completed the first part of the question. Let's move on to the second one. Find all the details of the student who got the lowest mark in the first term Sinhala subject. Okay, now we have to find the details of the student who got the lowest mark in Sinhala subject. So in this case, you can see, let me go to the HDSQL browser and show you the information. here in the student table, that's the table we use to store the details of the student. So we have to connect this table too, and I like to use join query method for this part. I think we have to use the join queries and the subqueries combined together in this query, because this little bit complicated one. Let's clear this query. Now I'm going to join all the tables, because we need the details of the student, all the details of the student, like class, student details, and the exam details, subject details, like that. So first I'm joining all the details together. Here I'm writing a select query. Select for now all from, here's the first table, exam mark DB, and here's the table name. I'm joining the student table first, because that's the table which store the student data, and we can use there are two methods, inner join and self join. We use self join method in my previous videos, so today I'm going to use the inner join method. There's no that much different between these two methods, but self join method join the table by itself, and in this case inner join or left join, like those methods, we are defining the condition or method how to join those tables to the database management system. So inner join, that's the keyword, inner join, and here's the second table, exam mark DB, and I'm joining the class table first. So here I joined two tables, but we have to mention the connection between these two tables. What is the relation between these two tables? Usually, in this case, we have to mention what keyword is foreign to the other table. That way, we can find the or compare the data of those two tables and join them together with a corresponding order. So here's the first one. In the student table, I'm mentioning the attribute name which is foreign to the other table. It is actually the class ID foreign to the student table, but there's no order to mention that one. We can mention the student table first, like this one, student dot class ID. That's the attribute which foreign from the class table, and it should be equal to the class table, and here's the attribute name, class ID. Let's execute this one and see what are the details. Here you can see both class table and the student table are joined together, and here let's connect other tables to inner join. I'm joining the student exam mark record to this one. Here's the database name, exam mark DB, and student exam mark record table, and here's the condition. I'm writing the condition to the exam mark DB and the student table. So here's the student table, student table dot index number. It is the attribute which foreign to the student exam mark record table. Here student exam mark record table dot student index number. Let's execute this one too. Here you can see our data are here. Now let's join the other table. Inner join. Inner join, and here's the database name, and I'm joining. We join three tables: the class table, student table, and the student exam mark record table. Now we have to join other two tables, which are exam term and subject table. Here the exam term, and on the exam ID in the exam table. Exam ID in the exam term table should be equal to the exam ID in the student exam mark record table. So student exam mark record table exam term ID. Okay, let's execute this one. Here we combine those tables. Here's the last one. We combine 4 tables, and this is the last one. We are combining the subject table to the list, and inner join, and here's the database name and the table name. We are joining the subject table. On the subject ID is foreign to the student exam mark record table. So student exam mark record table, and here's the attribute subject ID. That's the ID which foreign from the subject table, and here's the subject table, subject dot subject ID. Let's execute this one too, and here we combine all the tables together. Now we have to find our answer using the conditions and the keywords out from this whole answer. But before that, I like to define what are the attributes we want as our answer. You can see there are many attributes in our result that we don't need that much. Like the class ID is duplicated in everywhere, like this. The term ID, we don't need that. The exam term ID, we need only the values, like the class names and the student details, like that. We don't need the index numbers and the IDs. So we can filter them by changing this asterisk mark, and then specify our attributes we want. So here's the first list of attributes. I need all the details of the student. Okay, here here's the table name. You can see we joined 5 tables together, and it's better we use the we mention the table name first. So here's the table name. We need all the details in the student table. So we can use the asterisk mark. We don't have to specify every attribute one by one. We can use the asterisk marks for this. Let me show you. If we use the asterisk mark, you can see only the all the details or all the attributes in our student table are shown as the answer, and I need class name in the class table. So here's the class table, and class name, need the class name. So let's execute that one too. You can see the class name added to the class table. Actually we have to replace this one because we don't need the class ID in our answer. So we have to change the asterisk mark in the student table. We have to specify them too. So here index number, first one, and then in the student table here's the first name, and then again in the student table here's the last name, and again student table here's the gender, and then the contact number, student table, contact number, and here's the I think that's the last one. Yes, that's the last one, contact number. Okay, let's execute this one. You can see the ID, the class ID disappeared from our answer. Now let me define other attributes we want. So then we want the subject name of the in the subject table. So subject name in the subject table, like this, and then the mark in the student exam mark records. So student exam mark record table and the mark attribute inside that one. Here the marks are shown in our result, and then the term name of the in the exam term table. So exam term table and term name. Then we want in the exam term table the exam date. We need the date of the exam. So here are the details we want. That will be enough for our details. We find the details of the student and the subject and the terms and marks, like that. All the details are shown in our result. So here you can see in this result all the details are here, but you can see the question. We have to find specifically the kid, the student who record the lowest mark in the first term for single subject. So in this case we have to define a condition, but unlike the subqueries, we don't have to write search queries again and again. You can see we combined all 5 tables together, and now we can call to the specific table as in a where clause. So let me go to the end of the query. Is the end of the query, and we can write a where clause. Here's the where clause. Here I'm writing the conditions. Here's the first condition. We need only the details of the, you can see, the first term test. I'm writing the first term test first. So let me mention the database name and then the table name, exam mark record, the exam term table, and it should be equal to, now we can directly tell the value we want to filter. So exam term, let me change this one. In the exam term table we can call the table directly. So in the exam term table, here's the attribute, the term name should be equal to first term. Let me execute this one. You can see only the first term details are shown in the result. Here are the first term details, and then we can write our next condition. We don't need all the subjects in the first term test. We only need the single subject marks, and the records of the single subject belongs to the single subject. So the details or the names of the subject are stored in the subject table. So here I'm mentioning the I'm calling the subject subject table, and here's the subject name. Subject name should be equal to Sinhala language and literature. Let me copy that one. Here's the subject name, Sinhala language and literature. You can see we find the details only belongs to the Sinhala language and literature in first term test. Here are the details of the student who faced that exam, but we need the lowest mark, or the you can see who got the lowest mark in the first term test. So in this case we have to find the lowest mark, but you can see in our join query we cannot define the minimum mark directly as a join query. In order to do that, we have to write a sub query to get the minimum mark in this within these scopes, the Sinhala subject and the first term test. So we have to join a sub query to this one as a condition. So here's the condition. I'm using the AND keyword, and then here's the attribute name in our table, student exam mark table. That's the record which records the marks. We are filtering the details using the marks in the student exam mark record table, and we should feed the lowest mark to this query. So here's the sub query. I'm separating that one from using two brackets, and here's the sub query to our to find the minimum mark in the first term test for Sinhala subject. Here select, we need only the mark, so let's define the mark. So mark, and then from here I'm mentioning the table exam mark. Here's the database, and then the table exam mark record, and is the condition where the first condition is we need the minimum mark in the first term test. So the attribute in the student exam mark we can which we can use to find the first term is the term ID, exam term ID. So let me copy that name. Let's mention that one, student exam mark record table, and here's the attribute exam term ID should be equal to, now we have to write another sub query to get the ID out of the exam term table. Select, and here's the term ID. Let me go to the exam term table quickly and copy the attribute name term ID. That should be the output from this sub query, and from exam mark DB, and here's the exam term table, and here's the where clause. I'm define the condition to get the ID of the term. I'm using the name, the term name. So is the term name, okay, should be equal to the first term test. So first term, okay, is the query. Let's execute this. Sorry, you can see there's an error pop up when I execute this one. The sub query returns more than one row. You can see we find the ID of the first term test, and then we feed that ID to the condition to the exam mark record, the student exam mark record table, to find the minimum mark out of this one. We just write to get the mark of the first term test, but we don't we need the minimum mark of that one, so we have to change this output to the to output the minimum mark. So we have to define the or write the min keyword and then put the mark attribute to output the value. So let's execute this one. You can see there's no values yet. Let's write our next query too. Here's the second condition. To get the minimum value, we need only the minimum value in the Sinhala subject for the first term. So here I'm mentioning the subject. Before that, we have to mention the attribute in the current table or the main table, which is the student exam mark record table. So student exam mark record table, and then here's the subject ID should be equal to, and then now we can write our next subquery to find the ID of the Sinhala subject in subject table. So here's the select query to the subject table. I need only the subject ID. So let me copy the attribute name. Let's go to the subject table and copy the attribute name subject ID from, and here's the database name exam mark DB and the subject, and here's the where clause to filter by the name, by the subject name. Here's the subject name. Let me put this within two gravation marks and should be equal to, here's the value Sinhala language and literature. Let me copy the name of the subject. Okay, now we can execute this one. Here you can see here are the result of the student who got the lowest mark to Sinhala subject in the first term test. She is Madara Vanasekara, and here we answer for our second part of the question, and let's move on to the third one. What is the lowest mark obtained in the second term science subject? Okay, we already done a question part like this in the first one. We find the lowest mark in the Sinhala subject for first term, and here we have to find the lowest mark in the second term test science subject. Okay, let's go to our Hades SQL browser again. I'm going to let me show you the full query, the whole query in the previous part of the question. Here's the full query in the previous part of the question, and let me clear this one. Let's write a new query. Okay, in here first the marks are stored in our student exam mark record, so we have to write the main query to that table. So select for now asterisk from here I'm mentioning the database name and then the student exam mark record table, which is the main table, where and then here's the where clause. I'm going to write our condition. Let me execute the query. We already saw the answers for this one. You can see all the marks are shown in the result, but we need only the second term test mark for science subject. So here I'm mentioning the term first. So here's the term. Before that we have to use the where clause, and then we have to mention the attribute we are going to use to filter our data in the main query, the student exam mark record table, which is the, you can see, exam term ID. Let me copy that name, exam term ID, and it should be equal to the result which will output from this subquery. Let's write our subquery. We can find the ID in the exam term table by using the term name. So select, we need only the term ID, so term ID, and then from here's the database name, exam DB, and then exam term table is the where clause, where, and then here's the attribute name, term name. We are searching the data from term name in the exam term table. Name should be equal to second term, so second term. Let's execute this one. You can see only the second term mark. You can see the ID, all the records are shown the exam ID as 2, which is the ID of the second term test. Let me show you. Here's the ID in the second term test. It is number 2. Okay. Now we have to write another condition because we don't need all the subjects in the second term test. We need only the science subject. So here I'm mentioning the subject called science, and before that we have to mention the attribute name of the main table, which is the subject ID. So let me copy that one. Subject ID should be equal to the result which will output from this query, this subquery select. We need subject ID. Let me copy the attribute name, subject ID, from exam mark DB, and then the subject table where clause, and here's the attribute name in the subject table, which is the subject name. That's the attribute we are going to use to filter our data by the subject name, and here's the subject name science. Okay, let's execute this one. You can see only the second term test science marks are shown in our result, but now we don't need all the marks. We need only the maximum the minimum mark. Let me go to the question. Yes, we need the lowest mark obtaining the second term test science subject. So you know what we have to do. We have to use the keyword min and put a attribute name to filter the minimum mark out from the data pool. So here I'm mentioning the mark attribute, and let's execute this one. You can see the minimum mark in second term test is 45.52, and let's we can for an addition we can change the attribute name of the result using the as keyword, and then here's the attribute name minimum mark, like that. We can use any name to that attribute. Here I change it to minimum mark. So let me show you the whole query. Here's the whole query for the third part of the question. Let's move on to the fourth one. What is the minimum mark obtained for the subject of mathematics in the term examination held on 2020-7-10? Okay, now there's only the exam date, not the exam or the term name. There's a subject name and then the exam date. So let me show you the table, exam term table. You can see that's the table which store the exam date. So we have to write a select query to this table and then another select query to the subject table to find the mathematics ID. and then we can feed those data or feed those ID as conditions using a where clause to the main table, which is the student exam mark table, and then find the lowest mark. So let me clear this one. Let's write our main query, select and for now asterisk from exam mark db, and then student exam mark record, and here's the where clause. Where is the first condition. In the student exam mark record, the attribute called let me go to the table. The attribute called exam term id. Exam term id, let me copy the attribute name. Exam term id should be equal to this data which will output from the subquery, and here's the subquery to find the id from the exam term table using the exam date given to us. Okay, here we need only the term id, so term id and from exam mark db, and here's the exam term table. Where now here's the condition. We can use the exam date to find the result or find the term id. So here here's the attribute name, exam date. Let me verify that attribute name. Let's go to the exam term table. Yes, exam date, exam date, and here's the value. The date should be equal to 2020 7/10. Let's go to our question and see. Here 2020, here's the month 7 and this is the date 10. Okay, let's execute this one. You can see the result belong to the exam which held on this date are shown in our result, and then we can write our next condition. We need only the marks of the mathematics subject in the exam which held on this date. So here I am mentioning the subject. So here's the first attribute. So here's the attribute in our main table, which is the student exam mark record table, which is the subject id, and it should be equal to the data output from this subquery select. We need only the subject id, so subject id from subject table exam mark db and subject table. Here's the where clause. We need the subject id of the subject of the subject mathematics. So here I'm mentioning the attribute name. The subject name should be equal to mathematics. Let's execute this one. You can see now we find the result or the records belong to the mathematics subject and the exam which held on that date 2020-17, and now we can find the minimum mark out from this one using the keyword min. Let me change the asterisk marks to min, and let's define our attribute name mark. Now it will find the minimum mark of that exam. Here's the minimum mark 44.12. let me show you the whole query. This is the whole query we used to get our answer for the fourth question of question 23. Now we can move on to the fifth part. This is the last part of the question. Find all the details of the student who obtained the minimum mark obtained for the subject of mathematics in the term examination held on 2020 7-10. Okay, now this is another question like we done in the second part of the question. This is also going to be a long one. Here again we have to find the details of the student, not the mark. We have to find the details of the student, and here are the conditions. We have to find the lowest mark, and then the mathematics subject, the lowest mark of the mathematics subject, and the for the examination held on this date. So that means again we have to join our 5 tables and then get the answer out from that one. Let's go to our HSQL browser and let me clear this older one. Okay, first I am going to join the table. So here I'm using the select query, select for now asterisk from. Here's the first table, exam mark DB, that's the database name, and here's the table. I'm joining the class table first. So inner join, I'm using the inner join, and here's the second one, exam mark DB. And then here's the second table. I'm joining to the class table, the student table, and this is the connection within those two tables. The ID, the class ID, should equal to the class ID in the student table. So student table and the ID, the class ID in that table. So let's execute this one. Okay, here we combine the class table and the student table together, and here is the next table, inner join. Okay, here's the table, the student exam mark record table inside the exam mark DB, and here's the condition or the connection. The index number in the student table should be equal to the index number in the student exam mark table. So student exam mark record table and student index number. Okay, now we have to join only 2 tables. There are only 2 tables left, the exam term and the subject table, and here's the inner join keyword, and then the table, the exam term table on the term ID in exam term table should equal to the term ID in student exam mark record table. Here's the exam term ID. Let's execute this one. Okay, here's the last table we have to join to our list. Join we have to join the subject table. So exam mark DB and subject table on the subject ID in subject table should be equal to the subject ID in the student exam mark record table. Okay, is the subject ID. Okay, here we join 5 tables together, and now I'm defining the what are the attributes I need to show in my result. So I'm changing the asterisk mark, and then let's specify what are the attributes we need. So here's the first one. We need the student details. So here's the first one. In the student table, I need the index number of the student, and then again the student table. We did this part in the previous part of the question. First name and then the last name. Okay, and again student table, the gender, and here's the last one, student table, the contact number. Okay, now we have to we need the class of the student, so we have to mention the class name and the class name attribute in that table. Okay, now we need this marks of the student. So the marks are stored in student exam mark record table, and here's the attribute name mark, and then we need the name of the term, the exam term. So exam term table and the attribute term name, and then we have to show the it's better we show the date of the exam. So again in the exam term table, the exam date. Okay, let's execute this one. You can see only the specific attributes are shown in our result. Now we can define or write our conditions to filter our data in our result, or in our combination of tables. So here's the where clause. I'm putting that where clause at the end of the query. Where, here's the first one. We are searching for, let me show you the question, the subject mathematics. The result belongs to the subject mathematics, and then the examination held on this date. First I'm mentioning the subject. So here's the attribute or the subject ID in the main table, which is the student exam mark record table. Sorry, we don't need to do that. We can directly call that table. So we can directly call the exam table, sorry, subject table, subject, and subject name should be equal to, let me put this attribute name within two gray question marks, and here's the value. The subject name should be equal to mathematics. Let's go to a question and verify. Yes, we need to find the results of the subject mathematics, and let's execute this one. You can see only the mathematics marks are shown here. We forget to show the subject name, but it's okay because the question only asks for the lowest mark in the mathematics subject, but it's better we show that one. So let's update our attributes. Let me see the marks. We can show our subject name before the mark marks of the student. So here's the subject table, subject and the subject name. Okay, let's execute this one. You can see subject is added. Here the result only showing the marks of the mathematics subject and the records of the mathematics subject, and now we have to find the exam, find the details under this exam. So now we have to write another condition, so I'm using the AND keyword, and then here's the attribute term, exam term. In the exam term table, the term date should be equal to, okay, the exam date should be equal to 2020 7/10. Now you can see only the records or the marks of the mathematics subject held on the exam held on this date are shown in the result, and now we have to find the lowest mark. In this case, we use this method in the previous part of the question. We have to use the sub queries. We cannot use the join queries directly to find this answer. So here I am mentioning another condition to find the lowest mark. So student exam mark record table, the mark attribute. Okay, mark attribute should be equal to, and here's the subquery, select. We need the mark, minimum mark. So min mark. Let's mention the table names, student exam mark record, and then the mark. Okay, mark from, and here's the database and the table name, exam marks DB, and student exam mark record where is the where clause. Here's the condition. We have to mention the subject mathematics and the specific date of the examination again to find the minimum mark within those record. So here's the first one. In the student exam mark record table, we have to mention the attribute subject. So subject ID should be equal to, here's the other subquery to find the ID from the of the subject mathematics from the subject table, and we need the subject ID, subject ID from exam mark DB and subject table is the where clause, where subject name subject table subject name should be equal to mathematics. Okay, let's execute this one. It's showing the result, but we have to specify the date, the examination date. So I'm using the AND keyword again, and then the exam term ID should be equal to the result which will output from this subquery, the term ID from exam mark DB and exam term, just the where clause, where, and then the exam mark exam term table and term date. We are filtering the data from the exam date, so exam date should be equal to this date again, 2020 7/10. Okay, let's execute this one. You can see the result are shown here. The kid or the student who recorded the lowest mark for the mathematics subject exam, which is held on this date 2027-10, is Sandul Vijayaratne. So here's the full query. Let me show you the full query. This is the full query we used to get this answer. We completed the fifth part and also the last part of the question 23, and I think that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching.